All right, we're going to get started. Could everyone take their seats, please? Lauren, you're not at your seat. New member.
Call out a student.
Okay. She'll be right back.
You what?
Hello.
We're missing Bob.
Okay, we're going to get started. See, the door is open. Think we have everybody?
Bobby.
Bobby Yarbrough, welcome. Welcome, everyone, to the LSU Board of Supervisors meeting. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to express the concern and prayers of the Board of Supervisors and the entire LSU community for our Congressman and Majority Whip, Steve Scalise. Steve is a dear and personal childhood friend of mine and a friend of many of you. He is one of the most steadfast and ardent supporters of LSU, and the outpouring of love and concern from LSU has been profound and very much appreciated by the Congressman and his family. While Steve has a long road to recovery, the latest news is that he is in stable condition and improving every day. I would like to ask that you continue praying that Steve will make a full recovery and that all of our elected officials are kept safe. And on a special note, I was able to go to Omaha on Monday, get the ball, the first pitch thrown, and I delivered it to Steve on Tuesday morning and spent the day and evening with he and his wife and family and children. And those who truly are heroes, because the two officers who saved not only his life but all the rest, I've gotten to know personally over the last couple years in events with Steve. We actually were at the Jazz Fest together this year with them and Steve, and not only they're wonderful people, but they should be recognized on the same level and prayers on the same level. I can tell you that Steve is, we think, out of harm's way from a living and dying perspective, but it really was a horrible act, and he's going to suffer for a long time. So your prayers and your thoughts on a personal level and from a board perspective are appreciated for not only he and his family, but the brave people who protected him. And if it would not have been for the congressman who was a Army surgeon, we may be having a different conversation. So I wanted to say that as well. Thank y'all. It's now time to take public comment. Stephanie, has anyone signed up for public comment?
Yes, we have one person for public comment, Dr. Kenneth Perigo.
Thank you. Let me remind the speakers that you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
I'm Dr. Kenneth Perigo. I am a LSU med school graduate from New Orleans. I am president-elect for the Louisiana Urologic Society, and I'm also the chairman of the board for CB Medical. We had the opportunity to meet with the procurement office yesterday regarding the SFO for medical marijuana. We were informed that the scoring was extremely close. They did an exceptional job. They're a very professional group. We were informed that there were some new information that needed to be considered. Specifically, they did not understand our relationship with our grow partner, American Cannabis. They viewed them as a subcontractor, and they felt that that was a negative for us. The second thing that was extremely important was the minimum requirements with regards to financial stability. Their recommended group, GB Sciences, is a public company, and because they're a public company, individual members were not adequately vetted. 2 of their managing partners have filed for bankruptcy within the past 5 years with over $2 million. The vice president of the company has been cited for FERNA violations as an unregistered broker and managing funds with no assets with questionable fundraising tactics. And then the company is a going concern. They're a penny stock with $28 million in losses. They're not publicly traded. The next new information is the failure of the procurement department to look at the facility capacity. Currently, the facility capacity that they have chosen will not, at 100% capacity, be able to allow them to meet what they have committed to give to LSU. They gave far and above more than any other group that submitted, and even if they're growing at 100% capacity, they will not be able to fulfill that obligation. They have limited grow experience with less than 6 months. Their first crop actually was produced in May of 2017, a very small crop. So they do not meet the minimum qualifying requirements with regards to that as well. With regards to CB Medical, we were fully funded with $36 million. We have no debt. We have extensive grow experience of approximately 10 years with 1.5 million square feet of grow. We respectfully ask that you reconsider this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Now we move to the scheduled committee meetings. Chairman Moore, please convene the Academic Affairs Committee meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Stephanie, will you please call the roll, please?
Mr. Moore?
Here.
Mr. Williams? Here. Mr. Anderson? Here. Mr. Armentor? Here. Ms. Johnson? Here. Ms. Jones? Here. Mr. Perry? Chairman, you have quorum.
Thank you, Stephanie. We have 4 items to come before the committee this morning. I'll call on Dr. Kubek for the first item. Dr. Kubek.
Thank you. We have a robust and forward-leaning agenda today. First, we would like to bring forward 2 graduate certificates. First graduate certificate is in instructional coaching. The Department of Education in 2007 received a $1 million grant from the Board of Regents to develop a degree in certificate in instructional coaching. And think of instructional coaching as peer mentoring. So a certified teacher can get a certificate in instructional coaching, and then they serve as a mentor to other newer teachers. In 2012, Bessie approved instructional coaching as a certificate that people can receive, and now we're asking for permission to offer that officially through LSU.
Any questions of Dr. Kubek? Any further discussion? Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Motion. We have a second by Mr. Anderson. Any further discussion? Any opposed to the motion? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we've got a request from LSU A&M to establish the PhD in biological engineering. Dr. Kubek?
Yes, perhaps I could do the graduate certificate in vet med first.
That'd be great.
Okay,
Right.
okay. So the next one I'd like to bring forward is a graduate certificate proposal from the veterinary medicine school here at LSU. They had 809 students apply to become a doctor in veterinary medicine, of which we accepted 87. There's 2 reasons for this certificate. The first is to provide students with a little longer runway that perhaps are nearly at the dividing line to get admitted. They pursue this post-baccalaureate certificate. They would begin to take first-year courses for their doctor of veterinary medicine and a chance to improve their GPA and their competitive nature. This is not uncommon in the medical school arena. And secondly, it will also give them an opportunity to offer advanced anatomy courses and begin developing their own instructors for anatomy. So we view this as a positive move forward for the community.
Thank you, Dr. Kubek. Open for discussion. Any questions of Dr. Kubek? If not, do we have a motion for approval? So moved. Mr. Armature, second? Second. Any further discussion? Any opposition to the motion? Motion is approved. Thank you. Dr. Kubek, next, LSU A&M
Yes, sir.
establish a PhD in biological engineering.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I'm delighted to bring this PhD forward. The College of Engineering has a PhD in engineering science, of which there are concentrations: industrial engineering, biological engineering, and construction management. As part of the maturation process for the college, these were targeted to spin off into their own PhD programs at some point, and biological engineering now has reached that threshold. They currently have 15 students enrolled in the concentration. They would have their own PhD in biological sciences, which is typically what you see when a fully matured department. I do just want to say one other quick word, that this is part of a program that's developed between the department and Dr. Ollier, in which we have a fast path program where students can enter with to get a bachelor's degree in biological engineering, get direct admission to med school, and then pursue both their MD and their PhD simultaneously, and they would be reduced 1 to 2 years out of that program. That program started about 3 years ago. Those students that entered as freshmen will now be rolling into their first year of med school. We'd like to get this PhD formally established as part of that program.
Thank you, Dr. Kubek. Any discussion? Any questions, Dr. Kubek? If not, Chair will entertain a motion. So moved. Second? Second. Any further discussion? Any opposition to the motion? If not, the motion is approved. Next, request from LSU units to establish 2 associate degrees. Dr. Kubek?
Yes, sir. As you know, in the part of the strategic vision since Dr. Russell has arrived at LSU units is to expand the collaboration in the medical arena with the hospitals in her local area. And I'm just so pleased to see that continuing to grow, and this is adding to that portfolio, so my congratulations to Dr. Russell. The first is really an evolution. We currently offer a certificate in diagnostic medical sonography, and what they're asking to do is to add to that to make it a full associate's degree. The students would add an additional 8 hours in humanities and sciences to do that. It would not be eliminating the certificate, but adding this as an additional option, which, as I understand, is becoming kind of the commonplace for expectation for the students.
Thank you. Any questions, Dr. Kubek? Is there a motion for approval? Yes. So moved. Second? We have a second for the motion. Second by Mr. Armature. Any further discussion? Any opposition to the motion? If not, the motion is approved. Thank you. Dr. Kubek, next.
Surgical
establish-
technology?
Go ahead.
Okay. The next one that is being proposed by LSUE is indeed a new program, which would be part of that suite that I mentioned. They have nursing, radiology technology, respiratory therapy, sonography, and now we would add to that surgical technology, in which this is a new program. It will be an associate's degree program. It will require new resources. We don't want to get up and say that we're doing it for free, but they have done the modeling such that the enrollment would certainly cover the additional faculty. We would have to hire 2 new faculty to begin and add a 3rd faculty member after 3 years. It also requires a renovation of the labs. They have the lab space, but will require about $250,000 to do the lab renovation, and they currently have funding available through other sources to cover these costs. So we ask your permission to grow the initiative at LSUE in this regard.
Any questions, Dr. Kubek? Not, the chair will entertain a motion for approval.
So moved.
So moved. Second by Mr. Anderson. Any further discussion? Any opposition to the motion? If not, the motion is approved. Thank you. Dr. Kubek, next.
I have one final request, and that is a modification of conferral dates for online degree programs. Last fall, we ran into an issue such that our online degree programs, they are offered in 7-week sections. So these are students that are not on campus. They're taking their full degree online, such as we have a very aggressive program with the MBA at LSU Shreveport. So they finish their degrees at times different than the traditional campus. The situation we ran into last year was that the students from LSUS finished just a few days after our traditional degree granting period, such that those students would have to wait until the spring graduation to actually have their degree. This created some complexity for them to get their certificates, for their jobs, to give them the pay increase they would expect, and also for them to go on to additional graduate studies because they literally didn't have their degree in hand. So we view this as just part of our modification and growing of LSU to adapt to offering a more robust LSU online degree programs. I do just want to mention that we would have 3 new degree granting periods, 4 online, but these would be the same 3 across all campuses. So this would be a system-wide set of dates, and we provide in the proposal the first set of 3 dates that we would like to offer.
Any questions, Dr. Kubek, with regard to this item? If not, the chair will entertain a motion for approval. So moved by Glenn. Second? Second. Any further discussion? Any opposition to the motion? The motion is considered approved.
Thank you.
Dr. Kubek, anything else?
That's it.
Thank you, Dr. Kubek. Next, I think, is the consent agenda. Most of you should have received it in advance and reviewed it. Do we have any discussion concerning the approval of the consent agenda? If not, the chair will entertain a motion for approval. Mr. Anderson? Second. Mr. Armstrong, second. All in favor of the motion? Any opposition to the motion? Motion is considered approved. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our committee. Is there a motion to dismiss our
So moved.
adjourn? Second to adjourn? Second. We are now adjourned. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, James. Mr. Anderson, please convene the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 4 items and 1 consent agenda item to look at today. And Dan, would you start that process?
Sure, Mr. Anderson.
Oh, wait, roll call. And I was so eager to get into this non-controversial part of the agenda.
We all are.
Stephanie, call the roll, please.
Mr. Anderson.
Here.
Ms. Jones. Here. Ms. Johnson. Here. Mr. Mallett.
Here.
Mr. McCreary. Mr. McCollister. Chairman, you have quorum.
Thank you. Thank you, I think. Okay, Dan, let's dive into it.
All righty. Thank you, Mr. Anderson, members of the board. The first item is a recommendation to approve the extension of a cooperative endeavor agreement between the university and the LSU Research and Technology Foundation. It's been in place for a few years. The renewal of the requested renewal of the CEA is for 1 year for fiscal year 18. It will continue the services that have been provided by RTF to the LSU research campuses, including oversight and assistance with intellectual property and tech transfer, record maintenance, legal services in that regard, and also managing the LIFT program and competition. The overall budget increases by approximately $34,000 overall from last year to this year to next year, and this was recommended by the President's Committee on Technology Transfer, which includes representatives from each of the LSU research campuses. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have and seek your approval.
Any questions? Do I have a motion to approve item 1?
So moved.
And a second? Second on that. Any further discussion? Any opposition? Hearing none, so moved. Dan?
The second item is approval of the fiscal year 2017 supplemental appropriation that was passed by the legislature, and also the fiscal year 2018 appropriation that was passed by the legislature in special session and sent to the governor. The fiscal year 18 budget is essentially at FY17 levels overall, less a 0.07% mandated reduction from all higher education institutions. The purpose of this particular resolution is to seek your approval to begin moving forward with budget development primarily for budget development for fiscal year 18. We will be, as in past years, we will be bringing the actual operating budget for the university back to you for your approval at the September board meeting. The fiscal year 17 supplemental appropriations provided overall about $6.3 million in additional expenditure authority for self-generated funds, primarily due to enrollment changes and fee increases that were implemented this year, and again, adjusting those budgets just to remain consistent with those workload changes. With that, I would request your approval and be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, you've heard the discussion. Any questions? Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Motion and a second?
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve that request. Any further discussion?
Dan, could you just comment on, compared with the previous years, the value of this budget that everybody worked so hard on, and the fact that the governor and our legislative leaders work to protect higher education and TOPS?
Yes, thank you for pointing that out, President Alexander. Yes, we were, even though we remained flat at the end of the day in terms of our overall budget, the beginning of the budget process back in with the governor's budget began at a much lower number than that. And so through the efforts of many in this room and our friends in the governor's office and in the legislature, working collectively to protect higher education after several years of reductions in state support, we were able to come out of this budget as well as we could could have hoped for. In addition, there was full funding of the TOPS program, which again will provide much needed support for many of our students and students across Louisiana. And again, it was through the efforts of many in this room and elsewhere.
And I think you summarized that extremely well. When we started that whole process, it looked it didn't really look good for the budget situation that we were facing, and the governor and other leaders up there did an extremely good job of getting us to the point that we are. Still have some problems in the future, but right now we're in pretty decent shape. Stephanie, we got a motion and a second on that? Okay. Any opposition to approving going forward with the budget recommendation? Hearing none, so moved. Third recommendation. Dan.
Thank you. The third resolution is a recommendation to approve fees pursuant to the authority granted in House Bill 113 that was passed in the 2017 legislative session. This bill extends fee autonomy for post-secondary management boards for another 3 years. As you might remember, Representative Broadwater passed a bill 2 years ago that provided 2 years of fee autonomy for public colleges and universities in Louisiana. That autonomy, that authority sunsets on June 30th this year. As a result, there were a concerted effort to extend that sunset date, and that we were successful in working with our friends in the legislature to in fact pass that authority for 3 more years, so it will sunset on June 30th of 2020. This bill actually, subsequent to the item being sent out, this bill actually was signed by the governor and enacted into law as Act 293 on June 16th. So it is in fact effective August 1st of this year. The requested increases average for all of our campuses 2% increase overall, or approximately $70 a semester. The funds that are generated from this increase, again, keeping in mind that our budget is indeed flat, will help support our mandated cost increases and other related sorts of increases that we experience each year with regard to retirement and benefits and other sorts of costs that, again, we bear increases on one way or another each year. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions and would ask for your approval.
Any questions of Dan on the fee adjustment? Do we have a motion to approve that? So moved. Got a motion? Second. Somebody? Second? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Okay, Dan, item 4.
Okay. Item 4 is a request to authorize the Board of Supervisors to enter into a contract with GB Sciences to provide extraction, processing, and production of medical marijuana. This request is pursuant to legislation that was passed last year that would enable the production of medical marijuana by our Ag Center. There was, as you may recall, almost a year ago, there was a resolution requesting the ability to begin this process, this competitive process, which the Ag Center and our procurement office have worked very diligently on over the past year. And with that, I would like to turn this over to Sally McKechnie, who is the head of our procurement office and who was intimately involved with this process, so she could provide an overview of the various steps that were taken to ensure a fair process, and then turn it over to Dr. Richardson to provide some additional commentary on the programmatic aspects of this contract.
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, so we went through a procurement process which is governed by the procurement code that gives us the autonomy to do these procurements from state regulation through our own regulations. We did a solicitation for offers. We generally do solicitation for offers when we're doing a revenue generating contract because we're looking for offers, obviously. We started this process in February when we did the solicitation. Actually, we started it much before then. Worked very diligently with the Ag Center to make sure that we could develop the specifications to meet the requirements of the university. We went through the usual routine of advertising for bids for this. We did receive 7 bids initially. Some of them did not meet the minimum requirements. Of the 7, 4 met the minimum requirements, which also included a $1 million bid bond in order to participate in the process. After the review of the 4 proposals by a evaluation team which consisted of representatives of Pennington as well as New Orleans Health Science Center, Ag Center folks in my procurement team, we brought in 3 of those companies for presentations. After presentations were completed, and what we did as part of the evaluation process, we developed questions where we needed clarification from each of the 3 presenters. So they presented to the full committee, and then we did a best and final with 2 finalists. After that, of course, we then moved on to the process of issuing a notice of intent. The scoring was very close for both companies. The scoring was within 10 points, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have from there.
Anyone?
Dr.
Ellie?
Rich?
Sally, I've looked at the procedures that we use, and that's procedures we use with normal procurement of different things at the university. It appears that it was very thorough. The steps that were taken fit with what we've done in the past. I've looked at the selection committee, the distinguished people that served on that committee. I think they have a great amount of expertise in issues that deal with the university and that sort of stuff. The kind of a varied group of individuals that I have a lot of respect for, and the fact that it came out in extremely close fashion says a lot for the individuals or companies that pursued getting this contract with us, and I got to commend y'all for a job well done from the steps that were taken.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Richards?
I have something I want to raise. I just want to confirm with you, since we're at the meeting, that as a part of the process of ultimately finalizing something with the vendor, as we voted on and agreed to at the last meeting, the vendor in this case will be subject to the university's diversity supplier program once it is up and running, correct?
That is absolutely correct. Okay. And as part of the oral presentations, I provided them a summary document to be included in the contract that was stronger based on the language we'd negotiated in the previous contract.
Thank you.
So they're very well aware.
Thank you.
Dr. Richardson, you have some comments?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for allowing me a few comments on this particular process. First, I want to thank the procurement people. Sally and her staff have been phenomenal to work with. This was not your normal contract. It's not your normal arrangement. We were in uncharted territory, and they did a phenomenal job. They were exhaustive, complete, tiring. I don't think we had any bad words, but we had some tense meetings to get through this, and I want to thank them publicly for what they've done to get us here today. I have 3 people on my staff I want to single out. First, Hampton Grunwald, who devoted the last year, literally from this day last year, to working on this. He has a higher calling today. It's his 10th anniversary. He's on a trip. It's either be here and have you upset with him or have his wife upset with him. He opted to go on the trip with his wife. So, Ted Gaucher, who's sitting here, is an extract chemist. Ted runs our animal biotechnology laboratory, understands all the processes dealing with the extraction of things from plants and animals, and has been phenomenal in helping us understand the process of what goes on in the back room. And I recently brought on Dr. Ashley Mullins. Dr. Mullins has been extremely helpful through this process, and will be my liaison to the successful bidder as we get into this. A year ago today, almost, I think it was the latter part of June, after an interesting legislative session, I stood before you with a document about a resolution to enter into the medical marijuana program. And I promised you some things that day in terms of what we wanted to do, where we wanted to go. And I'm going to highlight those for you just quickly in terms of things that we thought were important. And I couched this into questions I thought you should ask me. And so that's how we went through this. First of all, we went through the act itself, how it got there, and why were the agricultural centers singled out to do this. And we were singled out to do this because law enforcement in the state of Louisiana did not want this grown in the private sector. And the only way they would approve the final voting of this, if they would grown in a public sector, and they look around the room, you got two real good choices, us and Southern University, who would be the growers of this. And so that's how we got listed in the bill by name to do this. We had an opt-in period, and I had a whole year, now, to study this before we had to opt in. So we spent all of 2015 and the first part of 2016 looking at this industry, visiting, talking, brought in outside counsel to sit down with us that was involved both from the law enforcement side as well as the forensic accounting side to look at this process. So we didn't want to jump into this, and I didn't want to recommend something to you that we hadn't done our homework on. We wanted to grow it indoors, not in fields. The program at Ole Miss, that's the National Designated Center, it's grown outside. We felt like we could do a much better job of controlling the plant growth process of this if it was grown indoors, and we'd like to have one facility where everything was done in a facility. The chain of command, chain of custody of this product was very critical to law enforcement in terms of how it was used and how it was done. How would it be financed? I promised you we would seek third-party financing, and that's part of what we're here today. We've identified a vendor that we recommended to you to be the third party to deal with this. The only state money I've got invested is what I've had to do just to get us to this particular process. Once it gets started, there'll be no state tax dollars going in to this facility and what's going on. And that's what we promised you. The rules for this were not made by us. The rules were written by the Department of Agriculture and Forestry. They're stringent. We worked with them hand in glove for a year to get the rules to where we could actually work in this state to do this. One of the things that I got from our outside consultants from Colorado, one of the principal partners of which is a former DEA agent, a district attorney, and he looks at this from the law enforcement side. The other law partner was a forensic accountant. He looks at it from the financial side, was that the state of Louisiana has a really good medical marijuana law compared to other states. That gave us a lot of comfort in terms of what we went forth to do. The rules for this is developed by the Louisiana Department of Agriculture and Forestry. They have put them together. We have been working with them, and we had to make sure as we put together our SFO and other documents that we followed those rules. Those are not Bill's rules. Those are rules that are set up for this particular process. And they looked at all the other states in terms of making sure we had things nice and tight, and they will have oversight in this process. We're just not turning this over to a vendor and say, send us a check. I want to make sure you're aware of that. I'll get into that a little bit more in a few minutes. How transparency? I told you I'd make this transparent. Everything we've done has been transparent. It's on the web. When a document was put out, it was there. Everything is out there. There hadn't been anything going on that hasn't been transparent. We wanted to make sure that public scrutiny of this was beyond reproach. And we've done everything we possibly could to ensure that. And I stand here today telling you with a very clear conscience, we made a great effort to make sure we got that done. The research aspect of this was very critical to us. Not only the research that involves a plant, but also the research that involves the medical uses of this particular product, which is one of the question marks in the entire country about this because of the lack of a lot of medical data, scientific, empirical data to show the impact. And we're interested in the research side. That's what excites me more than anything else. I don't want to be just another weed grower. We like the research aspect of this. We think the intellectual property income that we can create off this in the long term can be quite exciting and can have a lot of impact on where this goes. And I spent a lot of time telling you about that. That's why a university could justify being involved in this initiative. We weren't interested in recreational marijuana. We were interested in the medical aspects and the research components that we could do. Would be self-supporting. Would students be involved? No. There'll be no LSU students working in this facility. The facility will not be owned or adjacent to our campus or any other campus of higher education. There'll be no students working in there that's under 21 years of age. Those are things that are spelled out quite clearly. A business plan was developed and published. All of you have access to it. You can read it and take a look at it. Security is a major issue, external and internal. There can be no slippage inside that facility. Every leaf has to be accounted for. There can't be access for unauthorized personnel from the outside. We work very closely. One of my first meetings after that board meeting was to sit down with the district attorney in East Baton Rouge Parish and talk about this whole process, where we were going, how we will work together. Second meeting was with state police. Talk about the whole process, because I've got to cross a lot of jurisdictions to get this product delivered. Third meeting was the U.S. attorney. Make sure, first of all, I wasn't going to get arrested, but more importantly, that he was aware and had comfort with where we were going with this whole process. And I'll come back to some of that a little bit later. The federal status of marijuana, you've heard a lot about that in the last few months with the new administration. We are monitoring that. The bidders on this are monitoring that. We're very much aware of that status, and we're going to continue to move forth until some point that there's either change, positive or negatively, in that particular area. So that's what I promised you we would do. I'll stand here today and tell you we've accomplished that. We went through and made sure all these things were taken care of. Now, where are we today, and what are we recommending? We're requesting authorization to proceed ahead with contract negotiation between the Ag Center and GB Sciences. They've been given a notice of intent, and as Sally said, it's a publicly traded company. You've heard all of that. Its company's registered to do business in Louisiana, and each qualifying offer is reviewed by a selection team. I was not involved in the selection process. You do not see my name on there, because I wanted to maintain my objectivity to come here today and tell you I think we have the best offer that was put on the table. Let me reinforce some things to you that's going on during this period of time. First of all, this is the third time I came before you to give updates on this. The Allison-Newsman Act actually expires in 2020. So the legislature will have to act again before 2020 in order to continue this, which means to continue, the sooner we get this underway, the sooner we're successful in getting a product in the dispensaries, the better our case will be the legislature to continue this beyond 2020. But that is a fact that's out there. We've made this a transparent process. We've been very strategic, involved with all of our decisions. This will be in East Baton Rouge Parish. I've all talked about the students and so forth. Here's what we're asking. We anticipate a final contract this summer. We've said by August. That's getting pretty close. Final contract will be subject to approval and background checks conducted by the Department of Agriculture and Forestry. We're not through with this yet. A 5-year contract option to renew for 2 additional 5-year terms. 3.4 guaranteed minimum financial commitment over 5 years, or 10% of gross receipts, whichever is greater. Be an additional $500,000 invested specifically in agricultural center research in this particular project. There will be research started from day one. And the collaboration, and I can't emphasize this enough, the collaboration between the Pennington Biomedical Research Center and the Health Sciences Center is going to be really, really critical. We've got to make sure that the research component of this is strong and is defined and is committed. John Poss is here today. He's the CEO of GB Sciences. I've asked him to make a very few comments about their involvement, and I'll turn it over to him now for just a couple of minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Richardson. I'm John Poss, Chairman and CEO of GB Sciences, and I am honored to be here. We are honored, excited, and humbled by this opportunity. GB Sciences is dedicated to the science of cannabis. We are not a pot company. We do research. We've done a great deal of research. We filed 3 patents in the past 6 months on compounds that treat very specific conditions. We filed a patent on a group of cannabinoids and terpenes that treat neurological disorders. We filed a subsequent patent application on cannabinoids and terpenes that treat inflammatory disorders such as arthritis and Crohn's disease. And we recently filed a patent on a heart compound, on a compound that treats heart disease, cardiac hypertrophy, and pain. And I would add that that compound, in fact, many of our compounds contain no THC. There's many misconceptions about cannabis in this country. Cannabis is a plant whose mysteries are just now being unlocked, and we're at the forefront of unlocking those mysteries. That's why we're here. We're here because of the research. We're as excited about the research as we are the financial opportunity of serving the patients of Louisiana. So I thank you for this opportunity. We've got a lot of work to do, and I look forward to it, and my entire team couldn't be more enthusiastic and thrilled to be associated with this fine university. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
The process we have followed has been as pristine as I possibly can make it. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have or any comments you may have at this point in time.
Anybody have any questions of Dr. Richardson?
I do.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not a member of this committee, but I will lay out a mea culpa. This is a very sensitive matter, in my opinion. It involves a 15-year contract, large finances, and stakes for LSU. And I am not conversant with the issues as I would like to be. And I'll address this to our attorney, Mr. Skinner. Is there an opportunity to have language where we proceed today with the opportunity for those board members that would like to avail themselves of further inquiry to have the opportunity to do that and make themselves comfortable at some point with all of the answers that they seek in this controversial and important decision?
Yes, Mr. Armentor, we could proceed in the way that we did with the athletic concessions contract a month or so ago, and that is to authorize the president and Mr. Richardson to enter into negotiations with the winning bidder, but subject to satisfactory answers to questions that board members may wish to pose, and subject to the consent of the board acting through one of you as a designee, whether that be Mr. Armentor or somebody else. That way it allows the questions to be asked, deliberated over, answered, and if there are follow-up questions, those questions answered during that same 30-day period that the contract's being negotiated. It affords LSU and you all the opportunity not to get too far behind the curve from a timing standpoint.
And I'm trying to achieve that. So
in terms of competition, but at the same time ensures that you have an adequate opportunity to get those issues addressed that you may wish to have addressed, whether they be finances or other.
With the board's deference, I would certainly volunteer to be that designee.
I would move, if appropriate, that we proceed in that fashion and that we designate Mr. Well, I can't make the motion. I'm not on the committee. I withdraw.
I would like to make.
I'll take a motion in a few minutes from somebody on the committee, but seems to be some other people that want to make it. Go ahead, Stanley.
I'm not on the committee, but Bill, can you have someone address the board on finances, GB Science?
I didn't hear the first part of that, Stan.
Well, someone to address the board as to the financial wherewithal.
Stanley, why don't we?
Could we do that at the meeting that we're just discussing?
Right, why can't we discuss that after?
You want to do that in this.
Let's do the due diligence is going to occur. They've given, as I understand it, we're going to make a motion to approve this subject to review. I would prefer for us to do that in review, if you're okay with that.
I have a question that goes to the 5-year provision of the statute, which I pulled. My understanding of the statute is that the license can't be granted or the award can't be made for any longer than a 5-year period. Is that correct?
That is correct. The way that the SFO is written is if the legislature allows for additional years on the Nystrom Act, then we would be able to continue the contract for an additional 5. So we could renegotiate after 5 or do something different if we chose to.
So this is probably the lawyer in me, but one, because I think the sunset of the statute is going to occur before 5 years, I just want to make sure, maybe this is a time question and not a procurement question, that we have built into the contract that we can bail out before the 5 years if the statute is not authorized. I'm sure it's there, but I just have to ask.
Yes, and we would also include any other federal legislative changes that would prohibit us from doing the action to be able to get out of the contract.
Second, I am concerned about the options to renew as sort of being an end around the 5-year requirement. In other words, for all practical purposes, this ends up being a 15-year contract because it's got the 5 years with the 2 options to renew. Are we protected there with these options to renew where it's not going to be considered granting this for longer than the 5 years authorized by the statute? Or does the option to renew give us enough flexibility where it doesn't appear to be a 15-year contract?
If it doesn't, I'll make sure it does before we go to contract.
Perfect.
May I comment? Mr. Williams, that's exactly the kind of questions I'd like to ask at a subsequent meeting, simply because I'm uncomfortable not knowing the answers to those. And as lawyers, I'm feeling that I'd like to be comfortable when I vote on something this controversial.
Sure, and I think Mr. Armenton's point's well taken, and although I'm not on the committee, I would advocate that he be the point person for the board.
Okay, any other, Ann?
I just one comment. I'm going to proceed the way our chairman and the other members would like to proceed, but I think that, to say that there were questions and things that we don't have answers to, I received this information at least a week and a half ago. Had I had questions, and I'm not an attorney, I would have picked up the phone and called somebody before we get into a board meeting and say, I have questions, as a tactic to stall. So I'm going to proceed, but I just think that, we all have a fiduciary responsibility to read the stuff that we get a week to 2 weeks ahead of time. And if we have questions, if we have concerns, pick up a phone and ask the questions so that we don't get into a board meeting and have this charade happening.
Ann makes some pretty good points, I think. This is a normal procedure we've always used. And all of us can't serve on search committees and all of that stuff. We have to delegate that authority to the procedures and the individuals that we have that normally do that and bring that back to us. I know there's some concerns about some of the things that have been raised this morning. I think there's a way that we can manage those concerns and still move forward with the process. And unless there's any other questions, I'm going to ask Dan to read the resolution as he sees it and see if there's any adjustments that we want to make in it.
Well, before we do that, may I make a comment?
Yeah, go ahead, Glenn.
I began my statement with a mea culpa. Ann is absolutely right. I should have been more prepared. But I have read everything in the last 2 days concerning this issue, and I still have a number of questions that I'd like to have answered before I can feel comfortable about this subject. I'd just like to say that yes, Ann, you're correct, and I agree with you, and I assure you that will never happen again. However, having read all of the material, I am still uncomfortable about some issues that I think should be asked about.
And I did call several people. I called Mr. Richardson, I called the chairman. I've had some concerns also. I didn't know I had the ability to go directly to the people, which I would never do. And I thought when we got here, what we talked about doing is the solution to the problem. But I did make several calls just to see where this was at.
Okay, Dan.
Or Tom, either way.
Oh, okay, Tom, I'm sorry.
That's all right, Bobby, thank you.
Touche. Sit down, Dan. I don't want you again.
I'll read the resolution as it was originally proposed because I think it covers what we're talking about as long as we consider the context in which this discussion has taken place. And I'll say as a side note, this procurement process was a standard procurement process, and it followed all of the procedures that the university both is required to follow and should follow in selecting a vendor. The business itself obviously is nascent, the medical marijuana business, and so I think within the administration, many of the same questions that you all have, we have as well, and had as well. So the intent of the resolution was to provide some flexibility to keep us on track in terms of timing by allowing the negotiations with the bidder to proceed, but at the same time providing very clearly that the approval of the chair of the board or his designee, if he wishes to have a designee, the approval of the president and the approval of the general counsel were all necessary before any final agreement was entered into. So I don't know whether I should or you need me to read the resolution as it was originally proposed. I'm glad to do that just to clarify what we're talking about.
Yeah, Tom, let's do that.
Okay. The motion would be, the resolution would be, now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Supervisors of Louisiana State University and Agricultural and Mechanical College does hereby authorize Dr. F. King Alexander, President of the Louisiana State University, or his designee, acting on behalf and in the name of the Board, and in consultation with General Counsel, subject to concurrence of the Chair of the Board, to execute an agreement with GB Sciences, Inc. to provide and perform all necessary activities to produce usable medical marijuana product for patients through licensed dispensary pharmacies as outlined in the competitive solicitation and evaluation process, with all such agreements and documents, as well as any subsequent amendments thereto, to contain the terms and conditions that the President deems to be in the interest of LSU. So that allows the President to proceed and Mr. Richardson to proceed to negotiate. It allows consultation, requires consultation with the chair of the board and his designee, as well as legal approval before anything becomes finalized. I think that provides the protections that you all are looking for. If you'd like to build more into it, we can certainly do that.
Yes, I have a question. I understand that Glenn is going to be the appointed liaison. My question is, will I have an opportunity at that point in time to ask questions about the finances of GB Science?
I think it's up to the chair to designate whoever he would like, if that's what he wants to do. And
I'll speak to that.
Well, yeah.
So Stanley, I think it's said properly, and I think it speaks to this, but specifically, every member, including you, will have the opportunity to ask any and all questions that you have. And as chair, again, the president, the chair, and others, and going by the standard rules that have for procurement, and Glenn and I talked about this earlier, as well as I talked to just about every board member, even before today, who had called, that for me, because I had questions, as I shared with Glenn and others, I chose to take the road of, we still have the ability to not do this because it's subject to, and of course we had the president, the chair, and others. Therefore, the questions were going to be asked in the normal course of action. I think it's very good that Glenn and others brought it up and made sure we were very clear that there was some pauses, as there should be. This is not a normal procurement situation. So it is fair for, as I told Glenn earlier, for there to be above normal questions and concerns. And so, and as the chair, I am happy to, when appropriate, to make Glenn that person, as I have shared with him, and I think he's as best qualified for that in this situation. So I hope that clears it up. But absolutely, every question should and shall be, especially finance, be answered. And we have protections. Our lawyer is saying it. The procurement documents say it, of which I read. So I feel very comfortable.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That comports with my request and my understanding. I appreciate that very much.
Okay, is everybody comfortable with the direction that Tom laid out? All right, we need a motion to move forward.
So moved.
Got a motion and a second from someone? Okay, we got a motion.
I'm not on the committee.
The whole committee's right there.
Who's on the committee?
Nor am I, unfortunately.
Okay. We got a motion and a second to move forward with those restraints or direction or clarifications or whatever you want to call it included. And on the committee, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. It passed. I don't want to count the votes. All right. Now, Dan, where are you? You moved.
Sitting up there.
You moved.
I
Ronnie's back now.
Ronnie, I just want to make sure our new student board member wasn't the second on that last vote. All right, just,
Well, it'll be recorded appropriately.
All right, Dan, item 5 is a consent agenda item, and, you got any
This is an annual request brought forth by the Health Science Center in Shreveport to approve the FY 18 expenditure of funds from the Carol Feist Legacy that was established to benefit cancer research and related activities at the Health Science Center. The item itself, again, includes the proposed budget of $4.3 million for this purpose, and sets forth the various activities that will be funded under the terms of the legacy fund. Any expenditure over $1 million must be approved by the Board of Supervisors, and as this exceeds $1 million, your approval is requested.
Okay, you've heard the explanation of the consent agenda item. I guess we have to have an approval, so do I have a motion to accept that?
So moved.
Motion, second, to approve the consent agenda item. No opposition? Any opposition? Hearing none, so moved. Madam, well, no, we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Got a motion on a second to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. We're done.
Okay, we're done.
Mr. Anderson, that was wonderful. Good job.
Stumbling start.
Thank you, Ronnie. Vice Chair Duplessis, please convene the Property and Facility Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Stephanie, can you please call the roll?
Mr. McAllister? Ms. Duplessis?
Here.
Ms. Johnson? Here. Mr. Jacobs? Here. Mr. McCreary? Mr. Williams?
Here.
Chair, you have quorum.
Thank you. Our first item is a request from LSU and A&M to authorize an exchange of land with the new schools for Baton Rouge. Dan, can you please speak on the item?
Yes, Ms. Duplessis and members of the board. The first resolution is requesting approval to enter into a transfer of property to New Schools for Baton Rouge. The organization intends to open a charter school focused on serving economically disadvantaged children living in South Baton Rouge. The property that they've determined would most suit their needs is currently located on our Innovation Park property. They would like to obtain title to a 10-acre plot down there, or plat to construct their school. They are under some time constraint to move forward because they seek to open up the school first for operation in August of 2018, and would like to begin construction later this summer. In exchange for that property, there are two options that are being presented for your consideration. The first one being an outright land swap. We have identified, working with New Schools, we have identified as at the top of our list a plot of land that's immediately adjacent to LSU for strategic purposes. It's located on State Street. That property is still under consideration, although we are looking at other options as well. The second option would be an outright sale of the property to New Schools for Baton Rouge. In that case, we would be required to return the proceeds of the sale to the state unless the state deemed it appropriate for us to retain those funds for use at LSU A&M. Where we are right now in terms of the process is there have been two appraisals of the LSU piece of property. The first one came in that we conducted with an independent appraiser, came in at just a little over $2 million. The one that was done by New Schools for Baton Rouge was $1.25 million. Obviously, because of the distance between those two appraisals, the appropriate next step is to have both appraisers select a third independent appraisal to essentially come up with a consensus appraisal. We are in that process right now, and we'll get the appraisal back a week from tomorrow, is my understanding. Once we get that appraisal back, we will know what either the value of the swap property needs to be or what the sale price will be. What is being requested of you is to allow us to move forward with this process, to allow some time to sort out the options. The president would then elect one of the options by July 21st in consultation with the chair-elect, and the chair of the Property and Facilities Committee before executing said agreement. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions and would ask for your approval.
Are there any questions? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the request as presented. Motion, second? Second. All in favor? Ayes have it. The motion is carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next is Tony Lombardo. Can you please present the next two items?
Tony cannot make it today, so I am doing this presentation in his place. I'm Danny Mahaffey, Assistant Vice President and University Architect. This item, at the last board meeting, Dr. Ollier gave a general overview of this project, and the actual CEA and details will be presented to the board at the September meeting. And this resolution is just a first step in that process. And there are two documents in this resolution. The first is an amendment to the original right-of-use agreement with UMC-MC, the operators of the hospital site, and it would release that site and return it to LSU. The other document is an intent to grant a right-of-use agreement to the LSU Healthcare Network, who would eventually be a part of that CEA, and that will be presented in September. So this is just an intent to grant. The actual right-of-use agreement will be in the CEA. And if there are any questions, I can try to answer.
Okay. Are there any questions? So hearing no questions, may I have a motion? Somebody. And second, all in favor? The ayes have it. Motion is carried. Next, Tony. Danny? Sorry. We don't know who's here today, huh?
The third item is the future medical office building, and this project is to allow for the future development of medical office building or related facilities that would support the mission of the medical school and the hospital. And this project has been in the master plan of the hospital site from the very beginning, and it's the type of facilities a medical campus like this should have. And the goal of this is to grant a right-of-use agreement to the LSU Healthcare Network or an affiliated foundation, and they would develop a competitive process to select a partner to develop the property. And this resolution is similar to the proton therapy in that we have two documents. The first is an amendment to the original right of use with the UMC-MC to release the site and return it to LSU. The second is an intent to grant a right of use to the LSU Healthcare Network or the affiliated foundation who would eventually be a part of the CEA to develop the property with private partners. And these documents will be presented to the board at a later date as they are developed. This is just the first step. And if anybody has any questions, I can answer.
If I could comment, Chancellor Ollier is not here today because he and his wife moved onto a boat, and the boat, the road to the marina has been washed out. So we asked him to come up the river like he used to do, but he couldn't get out of the marina area.
Okay, are there any questions by members? Hearing none, may I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Second? Second. All in favor? Ayes have it. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that conclude, well, may I have a motion to adjourn our committee? So moved, second. Second, all in favor, aye. Mr. Chairman, our committee is adjourned.
Thank you, Ann. At this time, we will break for lunch. We will reconvene at 1 o'clock p.m.
Saved us 30 minutes.
Or more.